We think we understand snow. We see it as a soft blanket, a quiet promise of a holiday, a reason to stay inside, warm and safe, with a cup of hot cocoa and a good book. We watch the flakes drift down, each one a delicate, frozen star, and we feel a sense of peace. But this is a dangerous illusion. Snow is not gentle. It is a predator. It muffles the world, swallowing sound, until the only thing you can hear is the frantic beating of your own heart. Snow buries everything, without malice but with an absolute finality. Our first story comes from a woman named Clara who lived alone in a secluded farmhouse in rural Vermont. Solitude was her comfort, but on certain nights, it could feel like a trap. It was the winter of 2011, when the state was battered by a storm of historic proportions. Meteorologists called it a snowpocalypse, a siege of white that buried roads and erased the horizon. For 2 days, the snow fell without pause, a relentless curtain of white cutting her off from the world. The power grid surrendered on the first day. The phone lines followed, their silence more deafening than any static. Clara was an island in a churning, frozen sea. She had a stove and a full pantry, the kind of self-reliance born of the mountains. But this storm felt different. It had a personality, a malevolent energy pressing on the old house. The wind didn't just howl. It shrieked through the eaves, rattling the window panes with a persistent, rhythmic fury that felt almost intentional. At night, the world was in absolute blackness, broken only by the flicker of her stove, casting long, dancing shadows. On the third night, she sat huddled under a blanket, trying to read by candlelight, but every creak of the house put her on edge. Then came a sound that wasn't the storm, a deep, resonant thud against the side of the house. It was heavy, solid, the sound of dead weight. Her heart leaped into her throat. Her first thought, the rational one, was a heavy branch snapping under the weight of the snow. She strained to hear anything over the constant howl, but there was only silence from the impact. Just as she was about to dismiss it, she saw movement. At the living room window, a dark shape blotted out the swirling snow. It wasn't a branch. It was too tall, too symmetrical. Slowly, a face emerged from the blizzard and pressed against the glass. It was pale, almost luminous, the skin stretched tight over sharp cheekbones. The eyes were dark, hollow voids that seemed to absorb the candlelight. There was no expression, no sign of cold, no plea for help, just a vacant, unnerving stillness. He wore no hat or scarf, seemingly immune to the impossible cold. His breath fogged a small circle on the glass, the only proof he was real. He watched her for a long, silent moment. Then, he didn't walk away. He simply receded, dissolving back into the swirling white chaos, as if he were made of snow and shadow. The faint patch of condensation where his face had been was already fading. Relief washed over her, so potent it almost made her dizzy. Was it cabin fever? A hallucination? Just as a fragile calm returned, it started. A soft rhythmic sound, distinct from the wind. Tap, tap, tap. From the exact spot on the window. It was quiet, patient. Clara stumbled backward, a scream caught in her throat. In the flickering candlelight, she saw them. On the outside of the glass were thin, long scratches in the frost, as if a fingernail had been tapping, testing the barrier between them. Our next story takes us to the desolate, windswept plains of Wyoming. It involves a young couple, Mark and Jessica, who were chasing a dream west in the dead of winter. In January of 2018, they left Ohio for the promise of California. Their small sedan was packed to the roof with everything they owned, a vessel for their future sailing across the frozen heart of America. They were young, in love, and fueled by the reckless optimism that believes you can simply outdrive a blizzard. The radio crackled with urgent warnings. A major winter storm was descending. But they decided to press on, convinced they could slip through before the storm's grip fully closed. It was a fatal miscalculation. They were on a remote stretch of highway, miles from any town, when the storm didn't just arrive, it ambushed them. It hit with terrifying ferocity. The snow didn't fall, it attacked, moving horizontally, driven by gale-force winds that shrieked against the car. The yellow lane lines vanished completely. The world beyond the windshield ceased to exist, replaced by a churning, hypnotic white. They were utterly alone, a tiny bubble of warmth adrift in a featureless, white abyss. Panic began its cold creep. Mark fought the wheel as the tires slipped on invisible ice. All other headlights had long since disappeared. Jessica's phone confirmed it. No service, no GPS. They were utterly stranded. They crawled along for what felt like an eternity, until the engine sputtered, coughed a final, pathetic plume of exhaust, and fell silent. The sudden quiet was more terrifying than the storm itself. They had run out of gas. The heater died with the engine, and the cold, an insidious predator, began to seep in. A deep, bone-aching chill took hold as hypothermia began its work. They huddled under one thin blanket, their words growing slower as they talked to stay awake, speaking of the California sun like a desperate mantra. It was Jessica who saw it first. Through a small patch of cleared glass, a light appeared. Not headlights, but a faint, sickly yellow glow, bobbing rhythmically in the heart of the blizzard. As it drew nearer, they saw a shape, a lone figure, moving with an unnatural steadiness against the wind, carrying an old-fashioned lantern. Hope surged. "Help!" they cried, their voices hoarse, pounding on the glass. The figure paused, turned its head and raised a long hand in a strange, beckoning gesture. Then it turned and walked away, the light receding. A chilling choice. Follow that ghostly light or stay and freeze. Mark was ready to go, but Jessica felt a primal fear. Something was wrong. It didn't feel like a rescuer. It felt like a lure. They chose to stay. Defeated, they slumped back, the will to fight draining away as the cold pulled them into a heavy sleep. Minutes or hours later, a deep roar shook the car. The interior flooded with flashing red and blue lights. A monstrous yellow snowplow loomed at their bumper. The driver, a man named Gus, had been clearing a path on a hunch. Finding them was a miracle. They were saved. When they told him about the lantern, Gus's face hardened. He warned them of the winter walkers, storm spirits that local legend says lure travelers off the road with false lights into deep ravines. He pointed out his window. Their car, he explained, was parked less than 200 yards from a deep, snow-filled ravine, its edge invisible. If they'd followed the light, they'd have walked right into it. They were saved not by chasing a phantom hope, but by an instinctual fear of it. Sometimes the most terrifying thing is the false promise of salvation. This last story is perhaps the most unsettling, because it deals with the terror of isolation. It reminds us that when you're trapped, the greatest threat might not be what's outside, but what's been waiting inside all along. We're in northern Minnesota, a land of long, brutal winters where the wilderness is vast and unforgiving. A family of 4, David, Ann, and their 2 children, rented a remote cabin for a week-long getaway in 2021, seeking peace from the noise of the modern world. Their first days were idyllic, snowshoeing, building snowmen, and playing board games by the fire. They felt safe and secluded, a perfect escape from their worries. On the 5th day, the storm began, an epic, fast-moving blizzard. Within a single day, the cabin was completely entombed, swallowed by the white landscape. The snow piled to the roofline, doors were blocked, and the windows were sealed shut, plunging the cabin into a dim, eerie twilight. They had light from lamps and a fire, food and wood, but after 2 days of being buried alive, the novelty wore off. A suffocating claustrophobia began to set in. Then, the generator sputtered and died. The power flickered out, plunging them into a more primitive darkness. Only the fireplace and flashlights remained to push back the shadows. The old cabin groaned under the immense weight of the snow, each shudder sending a fresh wave of anxiety through the family. The children grew restless and afraid, their fear feeding off their parents' unspoken tension. The small space felt like it was shrinking by the hour. They checked their phones constantly. No service. They were utterly cut off, with no idea when the storm would end. On the 3rd night, as the family huddled for warmth in the oppressive silence, they heard it. A new sound, one that didn't belong. It wasn't the wind or the groaning house. It was coming from inside the cabin with them. A faint, dry scraping, from the small, unused pantry at the back of the cabin. They tried to dismiss it, hoping it was just a mouse. Scrap! A long, deliberate sound like a fingernail dragging slowly across old, dry wood. David, knuckles white, grabbed a flashlight. He walked to the pantry and slowly pulled the door open, its creak echoing in the tense silence. He shone the beam into every corner. Nothing. No mouse, no raccoon, no hole, no sign of entry. Just dust and forgotten shelves. He closed the door, relieved. Then it started again. Louder, more insistent. Scrape, scrape, scrape. It was a desperate, frantic sound now. David pressed his ear to the wall. The sound was coming from inside it, trapped between the inner and outer logs, clawing, trying to get out. By morning, a roar approached. A snowplow and rescue team dug them out. The family stumbled into the blinding light free, but the terror of the night lingered. The lead ranger told them the cabin was old, with a dark history. A trapper in the 1920s had frozen to death outside his door. His family waited inside and were never seen again. As they left, David glanced back at the cabin one last time. On the pantry door were fresh, deep gouges in the wood that hadn't been there before. Snow doesn't just bury houses. Sometimes, in the crushing silence and the dark, it awakens what is already buried inside them. The stories you heard are true. Details altered to protect survivors, names changed to guard the haunted. Listen closely when the snow falls next time. Some things in the white never let you go.